Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today, I'm going to be doing something that I've never done before. I'm going to cross-promote this video on both my YouTube channel, Reviews for Nerds, and my YouTube channel, Last Stop Watch channel. Now, if you're watching this on either one of those channels and not familiar with the other, Reviews for Nerds is all about technology and DIY builds, while the Last Stop Watch channel is all about watches. Now, speaking of that, I need to get to a wrist check. Today, I'm wearing my Casio CA53 calculator watch. I like this watch because it's very nostalgic, reminds me of when I was a kid, and it's just kind of cool. It's the Marty McFly watch from Back to the Future. Let's get on to our project. So as I mentioned before, this is something that I can cross-promote on both of my channels. So for the Reviews for Nerds channel, this is a DIY build. And for my Last Stop Watch channel, this is going to be a clock when we're all finished. So, since it applies to both, I'm posting this video in both places. If you're interested in any of the information, if you're interested in checking out either of the other channels, I will be providing links to the other channel in the description of this video, so check that out. And while you're there, a sub to the channel will be awesome as well. Let's take a look at what we've got inside the bag. First off, we have a list of instructions. So as you can see here, all of these instructions are in Chinese, which isn't really going to help me out a lot, but there is a solution for that, and I'll show you that now. So here is the circuit board that we're going to be soldering all these components onto. Now this is the back of the circuit board, and as you can see on the front of the circuit board, it shows us where we can put all of the individual components. Speaking of components, we have a 4-digit 7-segment display. We have two 10K resistors. We have an IC socket connector. We have a buzzer because this clock actually has several different alarms on it. Let's get the rest of this out of here. We have 1, 2 30 picofarad capacitors. We have 1 10 microfarad capacitor. Here is our 2-screw power connector. We have our AT89C21051 microcontroller, which is going to go right there on top of that IC connector. We have an SS8550 transistor. This is a SIP9 1 kilohertz resistor. And this is a 0.1 microfarad capacitor. These are 2 tactile switches to be used for changing the time. And last but not least, we have our 12 megahertz crystal. Now this is the actual part that will be keeping time for the clock. This thing vibrates back and forth at a certain frequency, allowing accurate timekeeping. I bought this DIY clock kit so that I could practice my soldering skills and build something cool. I purchased this particular kit off of AliExpress, and I will include a link to it in the description below. However, I found a much better version of this on Amazon, which will, 1, get you a lot quicker, and 2, just looks a little bit better in my opinion. And I'll include that link as well. Everything here is going to be kind of interesting for me. We're going to have to build this thing from the back forward, so I'm going to move this to the center so that I can show you guys what I'm doing. Maybe here. Okay. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put these two resistors in place. Just bending the tines ever so slightly so that I can get them in place. So the cool part about this is that I am learning all of these different components at the same time as I'm putting them together, figuring out where everything goes, learning the name, and that sort of thing. All right, so now that they're in place, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to put some mini fluxer on there. We've got our soldering iron. I'm just going to try to put some solder in the correct place here. I think what might be a smarter move is to bend these down like that. Please don't judge me too harshly. I don't solder things very much anymore, so I am way out of practice. But that's what this is for. There we go. We'll just snip the excess off here. There we go. Right as rain. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put these in. Bend these out just a little bit. That's our 30 microfarad. And here is the other one. Sorry, that's a 30 picofarad capacitor. And then our 10 microfarad capacitor. So same thing here, just bending everything down. And hopefully with just a little touch of our soldering iron here. Here we go. And snipping off our excess. All right. We've got one more of the 30 picofarad capacitors right here. Take a closer look at that. Looks good. Clean off our excess. It's coming together quite nicely. Up next, we have the crystal. Again, this is the part of the clock. Every quartz movement, including this watch, has a crystal in it that vibrates at a certain frequency so that the device can keep accurate time. Check and make sure that that's in snugly. There we go. Just wanted to make sure that the crystal is flush against the board, or as flush as I can get it. I don't think that matters. I just kind of wanted it that way. Clean up. Up next is going to be our buttons, our switches. I guess they are kind of the same thing, but they are called switches. So we are going to call them switches here. All right, so they're in. Just need to come under here. I think I'm going to just bend these little guys in. I'm just bending all the tabs inward so that I can then solder them in place without the buttons falling off. There we go. Both of our buttons are in place. Next we have our transistor. Now there are 3 holes for the transistor. I'm going to have to kind of spread these out just a little bit. It even shows you the direction that the transistor needs to be in order to work. So now that we're in here, I'm just going to bend these forward. I'm going to have to be careful because there's this little guy here from before. Might be a good idea to just kind of snip that down a little bit. Okay. Make sure he's in place. Looks good. Snip off our excess. And there you go. Now we are on to our IC connector. Which goes on right here. Mine got a little bit bent in shipping, but it's not a big deal. You can just unbend those pins or bend them back to the correct position. Little fella here. There we go. Now I'm going to do the same thing that I did for the buttons, or sorry, switches. Just kind of bend all of these in the best I can. All right. We've got the IC board in place, and now we need our 1 kilohertz resistor. Same procedure here. This time, I'm going to load it down with some flux paste. See if that helps out any. To see if that helps out any. Yeah. Our next step is to put this capacitor in, and this has a negative side which has to go in here. So you've got positive and you've got negative down here. I'm going to take this and Bend him up like that. I'm pretty sure this flux pin helped out quite a bit in the soldering, so we're just going to keep using it. Get rid of our excess. We're going to put our power post in. Now this is just going to slide in right here. And there are several different options to power this. This is a 3.325 volt clock. So if you had a battery pack that would put out 3 volts, you could use that. I do not have one of those, so I will be using a wall wart that I have found that does 5 volts. Looks like we've got our power in now. Next is our buzzer. It also has a positive and a negative side. And you can also tell because these pins have different lengths, and the positive one's going to be the longer one. Just going to bend that pin down so we can hold it in place. I'm just trying to get solder across the hole there. Again, we'll cut off our excess. Here's our 4-digit 7-segment display. And if all of our stuff lined up from before, trying to bend these pins so that they will fit in the holes. There we go. Kind of bend this up here just to hold them in place. And I think what I might try to do is tack a couple of these that are standing up into place. And you can kind of see that I'm making a mess, but the plan is to clean that up when I'm finished. So we'll be cutting the excess of the tabs off. we go. And now, like with everything else, this is a really good practice for me to be able to freshen up my soldering skills. Just go back over these. There we go. Now our display's together. So the last step in this whole process is to put our IC in place. This microcontroller is what allows everything to this microcontroller is kind of the brains of everything. I'm just checking for alignment here. And I don't think there's any issues with the pins. There's our IC in its connector. So as far as that portion goes, we're finished. That's the setup. Now, as I said before, this does not come with a power supply. So what I've done in preparation is I've found this switching power supply which produces 5 volts at 2 amps max. I have figured out that according to this, the inside section is positive and the surrounding is your negative or neutral. And if we look at the bottom here, we see that this is positive and this is negative. So I'm going to take a little bit of heat shrink there. I'm just going to cover up my wires. And then we're going to take our positive lead over here and our negative lead over here. Actually, before I do that, one thing I am going to do to give these wires some extra bite when they go into the connector there is we're going to wrap some solder around each wire. Then we just simply melt it. And that'll give us a strong, solid connector instead of a braided connector. Again, positive, negative. And I did have a battery pack, but unfortunately this battery pack only produces 2.3 volts because it's just two 9-volt batteries. But this, as long as I've hooked everything up correctly, should work. So there we have it. There is our DIY clock, which obviously beeps. There's our alarms. And I'll have to read the instructions to figure out what the rest of this is. All right, so I've got the time set. I would show you how to do that, but it's very loud. But I will provide a link to another video where they show you how to set the time and everything like that. This thing has like 4 or 5 alarms on it that you can use, and an hour chime that you can turn on and off. So that's it. That's my DIY digital clock. If you have any questions about this build, please let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. As always, I thank you for watching this video. And if you haven't already, please hit that like and subscribe button. My name is Bryant. This is the Last Stop Watch channel. Have a great day.